All right, everybody. I think we should be recorded now, and make sure I do have my audio on because that's the last thing I want to do. All right, so welcome. Thank you all for joining me. It looks like we still have participants joining on, but it is 5 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Matthew Smith. I'm with Ohio State Extension here at Ohio State University and the College of Food, Ag, and Environmental Sciences. There is my email address. It's 11460. It's a very long number, but I'll have it at the front end as well as at the back end too. Obviously, feel free to take pictures if you want, but all of this is being recorded and it will be posted online along with all of the other presentations. This is Farm Science Review 2020. We're going to talk about considerations for getting into aquaculture and aquaponics in Ohio. We are also going to talk quite a bit for the last 15 slides or so on a lot of resources, because I certainly understand that there are a lot of people, if you're looking to getting into aquaculture, we're going to be looking at a lot of the more basic stuff. So it's just where you can go to find more resources to help yourself out. So some steps to decide if aquaculture is for you. So some of this stuff is just things you can find on my website that we're going to be discussing later, but what we're really going to think about is assess your personal resources. So understanding that this is a business. If you want to do this as a nonprofit venture, that's perfectly fine. I will help you any way I possibly can, and we'll do the best to make sure that you're successful. But for the most part, we're going to be discussing this as a business, because that's primarily what a lot of folks are interested here in the Midwest, here in Ohio, is actually trying to make some money at this. So along with assessing your personal resources and understanding that this is a business, you really need to understand first what your goals are. And you've got to be able to ask yourself that and answer them honestly. If you don't, then this is all going to be for naught, because you're going to end up wasting your time, your money, and your resources if you don't think about this holistically, both from your goals all the way on the front end to what you would actually like to get out of it on the back end as well. So the next thing we're going to start to think about, and all of these topics that these bullet points that I'm going to be talking about in this slide are not necessarily one's any better than the others. Some of these things you're going to need to be thinking about concurrently. And if you're not, then you're going to end up finding that you're not going to have a complete business plan at the end of it. But you do need to investigate your production systems. For example, here in the Midwest, we grow species in at least 5 different types of systems. In Ohio alone, we grow in at least 4 different types of systems. Predominantly, we need to understand that most of the production is in ponds. We have a significant amount of salmonid production in raceways. And then not far behind those, obviously, would be your recirculation aquaculture systems, or your RAS, and your aquaponics. And then we also have biofloc operations, namely saltwater shrimp. So that's your Vaname shrimp. But we also have other species that can be grown in these biofloc systems as well. So when you're thinking about assessing your resources, you got to think about your production systems, and you got to think about your species as well. So for the Midwest, I've got here, we culture over 50 different species of aquatic animals, plus probably equally as many or more plants, which I don't get too involved with, but I'm pretty heavily involved with the aquatic animal side. But at over 50 species in the Midwest, and we're culturing over 30 species here in Ohio alone, it does make things very overwhelming, because you start understanding that a lot of these animals can be grown in multiple different types of production systems. So which one are you going to go for? Which combination are you going to go for? And a lot of that's really going to come down to your market research. So that's where we get into learning your markets on here. Again, this is some of the stuff that needs to be considered at the same time. And a lot of times, a lot of the market stuff you're going to want to be doing before you even really start worrying about production systems. But again, a lot of this is stuff you're working on at the same time. So here's a lot of words, but basically what we're looking to do is that you're able to provide the necessary number, both in quantity and the size of for our purposes here. I'm going to mostly talk about aquatic animals. So you provide those animals at the quantities and size that the markets need, as well as can you grow that profitably. So as far as the desired part goes on the quantities and size, you have to then think back to 2 and 3 when we're talking about production systems and species. For example, if we have these pond-based production systems, perfectly fine, but you also have to understand either multi-batch systems or you have to understand staggered production in a way that you're not stocking all of your fry or your baby minnows, your fingerlings, your small fish. You're not stocking all of those at the same time because then all of a sudden they all become market size at the same time, depending on what your market is. Obviously, there's caveats to a lot of the stuff I say, and we can chat about that more. But if you put them all in at the same exact size, you're feeding them all the exact same amount of food, what are you going to have is a bunch of fish ready all at the same time. That is considerably more difficult for a market to absorb. And by market, that's a loose term, whether you're going to a restaurant, whether you're trying to process, whether you're trying to send it to a grocery store or whoever. And we'll get into more of those examples of markets, but it's a lot easier for you to have a steady supply for these markets as opposed to just trying to purge all of your product to the market all at the exact same time. Additionally, if there's multiple producers trying to do the same exact thing, the same species, and it's all ready at the same time, you just have a glutton of product, which again just drops the price, and that's not what we want to see at all. Because we understand seafood is it's a valuable product that we need to really take seriously and command as high a price as possible for that. And then profitable, given what you need to be able to sell it at. Obviously, we've got variable costs and total costs that we need to consider. Certainly, you can run just above variable cost, but below total cost for a short amount of time, but that's obviously not what we're looking at long term. But you need to really understand exactly what those costs of production are, because if you are having to sell a product, and that's wonderful if you can sell all you can grow, but if you can't sell all you can grow and still cover all of your costs and then some, you're really going to struggle in the long run. So we do have a lot of people that do way too high of expected prices that you're going to get from your product, as opposed to being more reasonable upfront when you're thinking about developing your business plan. And because they don't have these modest numbers put in, they might work in the short term, but being able to last even 5 years becomes quite difficult. I get that a lot of people aren't going to review a business plan annually, but at least developing that plan when you're getting started, if this is going to be an actual business that you're trying to make sustain itself for a very long time, you need to take this certainly into consideration. Business plans should take a lot of time, and you should spend a lot of time doing it, but they are well worth its weight in gold, being able to see it on the back end. And if you go back and just review annually small tweaks here and there and being able to think about it, that helps you really, as we talked about at the beginning. You should really consider your goals, and goals do change over time. Your knowledge changes over time. And so that can really help you out there. So if you're for sure starting, I've got a bunch of comments here for you. So we're going to research what it takes to run a farm. Again, this is the business, and I will keep hitting on this quite a good bit, because I cannot tell you how many times in my 5 years here at Ohio State that we get people that do tend to not understand that this is a business, and they want to take it kind of haphazardly. And again, if you're going to run this as a nonprofit, one, you should still run this in total seriousness. But if it's more of a hobby than even a nonprofit or than a business, that's one way to look at it. We understand that hobbies such as golfing is great. A lot of people love it. People get frustrated at it, but unless you're Tiger Woods, you're mostly just going to sink money into it. And the only real stuff you're going to get out of it is enjoyment and some iron. And so that's really wonderful. But again, that's more of just a hobby. And so if we're going to run this as a business, we need to treat it as such. And I'll get into that here in just a little bit. I bring this up again because we're going to investigate the production systems, but I bring up the what could be right for you added on to the end there, because again, it's experience more and more is letting me know that folks are getting in this haphazardly. So when we think about what could be right for you, we think about, as we discuss the goals, and specific examples on this would be, some people are extremely risk averse. And so they are not interested in And they are willing to accept zero levels of risk when it comes to losing their fish, or they have a very, very high tolerance for this. And so we start to get a better idea of not only do you need to understand the markets and the species and the systems, but what are you willing to bear? And so for a pond operation, such as the operation behind me, this is going to be a much lower density operation comparatively to a recirculation aquaculture system or even a highly tuned aquaponic system. So in those indoor systems, those systems are much more likely to be what we just consider living on life support. You have to provide all of the oxygen, and if the power goes out because someone hits a transformer or a telephone pole or whatever, you can easily lose that electricity. You lose that electricity, you have to be there on the farm to make sure that you can provide oxygen in some other way, or you better have backup generators that actually kick on and do what they're supposed to do. Those recirculation systems, you need to decide if that's right for you, because that is very, very, very stressful. Me personally, other than on a research scale and being able to absorb some of those costs that a farmer shouldn't, being working for a university, I'm too risk averse to want to be engaged heavily with recirculation aquaculture, because I tend to lean more towards a pond operation, because if something goes wrong and oxygen starts to drop, it takes it a much longer time for that to actually cause a significant problem for my ponds compared to if I had the same facility or the same species just reared indoors. So when we're thinking about production systems, we really need to think not only about our goals and how risk averse we are, but also we have to be realistic in what we can do physically. It is not uncommon for me to hear that they are going to use aquaculture or aquaponics. They're going to use their retirement funds, or it's going to be their retirement. A big problem I do have with that is that when folks do start to get into aquaculture older in life, they don't necessarily realize that just how backbreaking working a farm really can be. The easiest example I can give regarding not even including building the system, but just running things on the day-to-day. If you take just a moderate sized farm, for example, we have several tilapia farms here in the region that are 50, 100, couple 100,000 pounds in size for their indoor production systems. If you take just a 50,000 pound tilapia facility, well, at a 1-to-1 ratio for a food conversion ratio, that's 50,000 pounds of feed you're going to be feeding a system each year. If it's a 1.5 to 1 ratio, you're looking at 75,000 pounds of feed per year you're going to have to be feeding those fish. Obviously, you're not moving all 75,000 pounds all at the same exact time, but what you are doing is moving hundreds of pounds a day around, and you're going to be feeding quite a bit of feed every single day. And guess what? Those bags or that feed comes in 50, 55 pounds, sometimes 45-pound sacks. Those sacks get heavy. It really does take a lot of time and energy just to simply to be able to go through and feed your fish appropriately. And so when you're thinking about production systems, you're thinking about species, you got to understand from a design standpoint what you can actually do and what can be right from you. From my two examples, including risk aversion and just being, quite honestly, physically fit to be able to take care of a farm. Another comment is we do have a significant amount of producers throughout the Midwest, and I'd be glad to chat with you. If you're not in Ohio, I'd be glad to try to, I do a lot of region-wide work, and I'm funded by the North Central Regional Aquaculture Center, which I'll talk about later. And so there's a lot of farmers in the Midwest that are willing to be a resource for you and willing to let you learn either free or for pay, or you can come work on the farm. There's a lot of different ways. Obviously, you can work out with private producers. You can just simply tour, but most of them want you to do your homework first. You know, they don't want you to come up completely cold. And we'll talk a lot about homework here in just a little while. And homework is just another word for doing your research by looking at the resources partially that I'm going to provide here and following some of the examples that I provide for you here. But really do your homework and spend a lot of time learning from a lot of folks. And we'll get into why learning from folks is really important. I certainly would be remiss if I didn't talk about extension. So I'm part of the Cooperative Extension Service. We are one of the land-grant universities here in Ohio, the other one obviously being Central State University in Wilberforce. But we're here to help answer your questions and facilitate and be a part of you in your venture as you go to try to start or expand your operation. I do work very closely with a lot of businesses who are already running, and that's really where my forte is. But I do find a lot of solace and joy in helping folks get started. So I am here. Again, Julie put my email in the chat box. It was also at the beginning and it will be at the end. And I'm not very hard to find. Just to Matt Smith, OSU Aquaculture into Google and you'll probably get me. If you need funding to start your farm, unfortunately, it's probably not going to happen. I still get questions on folks just assuming that there's going to be a lot of startup funds out there for folks to tap into, whether it be for national, state, county, specifically regarding aquaculture. We get all sorts of questions about funding availability, and there's just really not a lot of that going to be there for you. There certainly was funding previously, such as down in the southern region when we look at more of the tobacco regions and we look at funding available to get tobacco producers doing something else. Certainly building hoop houses or greenhouses and things like that were some funds that you could go after, but there's really not a lot out there. So we get into some of the failures and why folks fail later on, but capital really does like to be, it really is one of those reasons. People just assume because of this awesome opportunity, this awesome section of agriculture, that there are just waves of funding that happen. And really it's just not going to unless you have some very special connections that most people don't, which is great if you do. You do really need to be engaged with your state, species, regional and or national societies and associations. So there's just a few examples here. Here in the state of Ohio, we have the Ohio Aquaculture Association, and you can see their emblem up top. They are a producer-based association that Ohio State University Extension works very closely with. They have they have annual conferences, and then we do tend to do at least 1 or 2 workshops outside of that as well, generally either water quality, fish health, species considerations, alternative pond production systems, whatever might be the interest of the folks in the state or in the region. And so that's a great one to be involved in, and I'm involved in that as well. We also on more of a research capacity. So if you're, maybe you're a student or maybe you are a researcher really interested, maybe you are a producer really interested in the latest and cutting edge research. We also have the U.S. Aquaculture Society, which is a chapter of the World Aquaculture Society that you can become engaged in. And there are annual meetings with it as well. And that is usually a fantastic meeting. And this coming up year, COVID willing, will be in Texas. And then certainly last but not least on this very quick examples of 3 examples that I have here is the National Aquaculture Association, which is a producer-based association, and it is our largest national, obviously, association that is there to help producers, and it has a board of directors of farmers that go through and do work on behalf of the National Aquaculture different associations and species, and kind of is a holistic approach to helping producers move forward, be more profitable, and just get things going. Last, please don't just visit YouTube and then become married to a system or a species. We see this every single day. We have people that, while YouTube is phenomenal, and I provide quite a bit of YouTube and Vimeo examples later on. And again, these are screenshots, this is all recorded, so you can go back and look at it later. But there's also, as we know, quite a bit of information out there regarding to YouTube that has a lot of misinformation on it. It doesn't matter if it's aquaculture or agriculture. We see a lot of make $100,000, $200,000 on a quarter of an acre, on an acre, whatever it may be. We see a lot of those types of videos out there, and then I end up getting the calls asking for specifics regarding aquaculture or aquaponics. And the fact of the matter is that doesn't tell the whole story. So we have to take that into consideration as well. I'm not going to read all these, but as we're thinking about our markets, and if you're for sure starting, you need to think about all of the different types of markets that are out there. The same species is undoubtedly going to be utilized for multiple, can be utilized in multiple different markets. For example, for human consumption or food fish, whatever you want to call it, rainbow trout is a very popular option that a lot of people really like. Another example would certainly be yellow perch. For more of the live Asian markets, we see a ton of largemouth bass being produced in Ohio and actually in Illinois. But as you can kind of see, and we think about, as we discussed earlier, our market's not only for the size that the markets are asking for, but in the quantities. And so we might see food fish being utilized for rainbow trout. You might see larger rainbow trout being utilized for food, but in very rare instances, you might be actually see rainbow trout in trophy bass ponds, which is not very common, but it is done. You also might see rainbow trout stocked for sport fish, for stock enhancement. You might see, again, largemouth bass being in the food. You might see largemouth bass being into the sport. And so a lot of these, we get to the kind of the poultry operations later on and how we're different from the poultry industry. A lot of this has to do with the positives of what we can do. And this gets into the fact that we have much more flexibility when being able to move our product, but it also means it's more effort on our part as well. All right, so here's where I get hungry because I haven't eaten yet. We're going to look, if you're started or interested, you got to do this research. Again, this is a business, and a business is a means of one's livelihood. So I've got my Chick-fil-A operation here. Obviously, I don't endorse Chick-fil-A. OSU doesn't endorse Chick-fil-A. It's a cool operation, and I thought about this when building a similar presentation for something else that I ended up pulling this on. But you think about this from more of a business aspect, this is a clean operation. You go in, everything's spotless. Folks are friendly. The food is generally very hot. It's a very quick. I don't care how long the lines are. Most of these operations really know what they're doing and move the product quickly. So if I'm sitting here and I'm trying to think, wow, this is awesome. This would be phenomenal. I live over here next to Farm Science Review. That would be great if there was a Chick-fil-A over this way and I want to start my own franchise. I'm certainly not just, even if I have the capital available, and even if I was allowed, which it's franchise, so you got to jump through a bunch of hoops. But I got to think about this still in the same revenue or same avenue as if I was trying to run any other type of business, whether it's a clothing business or an aquaculture enterprise or an aquaponic business. I got to think about this holistically and really do my research. So obviously one of the first things I'm going to think about is just spending time doing all the research I can on this particular fast food operations, careers and franchising websites, learning what it takes to be a franchisee. Do I need to have an MBA, or does it take someone that goes through and just works as a fry cook, works their way up to manager, and then eventually gets to become a franchisee? Can I just jump right in without any degree, without any experience, but just a load of money? What does it take for me to be able to go forward? And even if I didn't have the restrictions of franchising and I just wanted to start my own Chick-fil-A type operation, and there was no franchising because it was my own idea, am I really going to do that just haphazardly? No. And so we're not going to see that. But we do see that a lot of times in aquaculture, people jumping in way too fast without just getting their toes wet, no pun intended. And so I'm going to research all I can, not only within obviously the entity or the organizations or the specific avenue I'm trying to look for, but I need to spend time looking outside of this. So obviously there's 5 myths about becoming a Chick-fil-A franchisee. This is coming from the Chicken Wire, which is a newsletter by Chick-fil-A. So if I'm looking for unbiased opinions, I'm probably not going to get all of the truths, the good, bads, and the uglies from Chick-fil-A. So I'm going to go to my small business administrations, my SBAs in my area, and learn what the goods and bads are of running a fast food operation here outside of Farm Science Review. I'm going to learn more about the land and electricity that's available and water that's available. And I'm going to talk and do some market research outside of what Chick-fil-A might say. All of this just because while I trust one source, I need to get my research and my resources from a bunch of different places so that I can be better prepared as a small business owner looking to step into and start my own either franchisee or obviously any other type of fast food operations, or what we're really talking about is any other type of aquaculture or aquaponic operations. And so that's why a lot of on the back end here, we will, after I get through a few more slides, we'll start talking about aquaponic and aquaculture resources that are based by or that are provided by universities, and I think they're all going to be based by universities. So I'll stop there. So here in the Midwest, we have produced fish for a very long time, but we do still have some industries here in the Midwest that are in more of a beginner state. We do have to understand that we don't really have the chicken industry. We don't have that poultry industry that I alluded to earlier. So we have very few people contract growing. I will never forget when I very first moved to Arkansas. I think quite honestly, it was my very first call. And it was a tilapia producer that had, before I ever got there, had set up their operation. They had cultured tilapia, they had fed them, they'd grown them up to market size. And then I got a call that said, hey, I've got fish ready. Can you have someone come pick them up? Unfortunately, that is not the way this world works. We just don't have processors that are going to come pick those up. We really don't have too many live haulers that are just going to come pick those up from you. And unfortunately, I didn't really hear from that person anymore, but I did get contact with someone down in Alabama that was able to buy that product. What you then see, though, is desperation in their voice because they have an animal that is ready to move out of their system because they have smaller fish that are growing. And so what you end up having is a group of, I don't want to say vultures, but people know that you're desperate to move that product. And so you get really undercut on price, all because you were just expecting you'd culture these fish all the way up to farm plate size, look like good quality fish, but you didn't have a market for them in the first place. And so you get undercut on price, and that really puts a bad taste in your mouth. And so even if you could sell them anymore, why would you even want to? Because you feel like you were done a disservice. And really that's not what it's about. It's understanding that the market is on you. So you get that flexibility. And so I talk about not being the poultry industry having its perks. That means we don't have to just really accept what the processor is willing to pay. We can really go after the higher quality markets, the higher caliber markets that are going to provide and command or provide a higher price, and you can command a higher price compared to if you just went to the lowest seller. And then just on occasion, this isn't anything specific to aquaculture, but we hear, hope there's an accountant in the family, or I hope there's a strong people person in the family, because obviously sometimes we hear, obviously we have producers who like to produce. They like to be around their animals. They like to be around their plants, and they're not necessarily going to be one that want to be the face of agritourism. And so having some sort of counterpart there, if that's something you want to do, you certainly have to take into consideration these types of things. And so if you're thinking about it from more of the poultry industry and being able to have the flexibility of being able to market it, you really need to have somebody there that is willing to get out and really be in front of people and not just be in front of the farm all the time. All right, so my definition of research and doing my homework stems from utilizing Ohio State University's journals that we have that tend to stem from research journals and extension journals that are science-based, unbiased. I know where the finances, I know where the funding for the projects come from, but I got to take in consideration that obviously when other folks are doing their quote unquote research, a lot of the stuff they're just going to do is to find what they can find on Google. I have no idea who this person is, never listened to the podcast, don't know the guy's name. Just found this kind of interesting and agreed with some of what the person had to say regarding why small farms fail. And so I just listed 7 examples on the back end. And it's just some stuff that we need to take under consideration as we go forward. And so I won't spend too much time on these because I don't want to be just a total Debbie Downer, but the farm is approached as a lifestyle, not as a business. Again, if the only meat you eat is fish or seafood and you don't eat any other kind of meat and you're just doing this, you might want to call it a business, but really it is a hobby or just something you enjoy. Or if you do this as a lifestyle, all you want to do is feed the fish, but you don't want to think about all of the marketing that goes behind it, all of the economics that goes behind it, the accountancy that goes behind it. You've really got to understand that this is needs to be treated as a business. The farmer chose low-end profit streams. That gets to more of what we just talked about on the last slide regarding not being, and I just use poultry as an example. We just don't have those Tyson contracts, and so we do on the aquaculture side, if we put in the effort, have the ability to work towards trying to command a higher price. But again, just because you command a higher price doesn't necessarily mean that works that works on your enterprise budget. So you got to spend a lot of time there. There's poor or non-existent accounting. You can hire an accountant though, so I don't know. I didn't listen to his podcast on there. The farm is undercapitalized from the start. Do see that quite a good bit here in Ohio and throughout the Midwest. We have folks trying to start up with pennies and just assume that they're going to be able to find this free money everywhere and that people are going to be willing to just throw money at their operations, either from the government or just the general public. And that's not the way it works. There's a lack of focus or trying to do too much. There's a lot packed into that one sentence. And sometimes we do see a lot of that. If folks aren't taking this, if they're thinking about this, it gets back into reason one. If it's posed as more as a lifestyle or more as a hobby, I guess, as I would rather say, we have folks that just want to deal with the farm when it's convenient for them. And that's not what it takes to run an aquaculture operation, especially to any level that is going to be somewhat profitable, because it really is more like a dairy operation. You have to be there every single morning to check on them. The operation behind me, this oxygen is lowest right before sunrise. So guess when the farmer gets to come out and check oxygen? It's right before sunrise. It is not at noon whenever they feel like strolling in. They have to be there to make sure the farm's taken care of. They have to feed the fish. They have to check water quality. They have to maintain a high caliber animal, or else the animal's going to stress out and not grow. And that's something that we obviously need to avoid, both for the health of the animal, but also for the fact that this is a business as well. There's no attempt to emulate other farmers' success without understanding why they're successful and whether or not it can be replicated. I discussed earlier, a lot of farmers here in the Midwest and in Ohio are very receptive to being able to allow you to tour their farm, especially if they're engaged in agritourism. But you obviously can expect them to be skeptical. So you're really going to have to define and let them know why you're there, and make sure that that you have permission to be on their farm. But a lot of folks are willing to help out. In a lot of these operations and in a lot of the aquaculture space that we have here in the Midwest, there is room for growth. And so while you obviously have competition amongst other farmers, you also do find a lot of people willing to support you and help you out. And then lastly, marketing is an afterthought for many, which we've kind of beat kind of heavily, so I won't go too far on that. Why do people fall in love with aquaculture and aquaponics? Just a couple examples here. One, this is a very cute little system here, and this is obviously a hobby scale system, but we have a lack of understanding of what it means to run a farm successfully. We beat that horse earlier, so I don't want to dive too far into it, but what you have is people enjoying and really becoming immersed in YouTube. They might be visiting a couple farms here and there, which is all great, but there's not a true understanding of what it takes to run the farm as a business and run it as a profitable business. So people fall in love with the idea, and that's great, but they need to understand the entire story. And again, it's not my job to be a pessimist. It's my job to provide more of a holistic approach. It can provide a high quality nutrition for folks. It is novel to many folks. It's a great story, and it really is. And you can kind of see some of the effluent utilized from an aquaculture operation here, used to grow a small amount of greens. And then they learn the facts, and the facts is what I'll talk about next. And so bear with me. I've got one slide of facts, one other slide talking about Congress, and then we'll get into a lot of resources, and we can talk about those. So the facts is that we have a massive deficit here in the United States. Seafood is our second largest natural resource deficit. That is second only to crude oil. Our deficit here in the United States alone is over $11 billion every single year. And so what that means is we're importing 91% of our seafood. And that means obviously if we're importing it as opposed to exporting it or using it ourselves, we end up with massive deficits, hence over $11 billion. Top 3 species that we're culturing are shrimp, salmon, and tilapia. And then we produce or we consume almost 5 billion pounds in the United States every single year, which means we eat a lot of it. We just don't grow it here. And so people see this, this story that we eat all of this product, but it's all imported from other places in the world, which may or may not be grown in a sustainable manner. And they see opportunity. And there is great opportunity, but we've also seen this opportunity for the last 30 plus years, and we haven't necessarily seen a ton of growth here in the United States for reasons that are far too long to go over the next 24 minutes. We do have a $166 billion farm gate, and it is the fastest growing sector of agriculture, although we do have some countries that are slowing down and some countries that are actually going in reverse. So they're actually shrinking in the size of aquaculture in their country. And then the last slide I'll show here regarding the more of the policy and thinking about kind of the stuff that people are interested in. There have been other acts since then, and this is a modification, but I just say the last line. This is something coming down from Congress. It is therefore in the national interest, and it is national policy to encourage the development of aquaculture in the United States. And so this really is for 2 reasons. If you look a little bit above ahead, it talks about the trade deficit in fisheries. So we're pulling, we're importing into our country, but also it gets around utilizing, renewable resources. So we are overfishing, obviously, a lot of our waters. And so being able to supplement that with aquaculture means a great deal when over 50% of all seafood consumed on this planet now comes from aquaculture. You tie that into our greater than 90% being imported into the country, it provides great opportunity for people. All right, so done with all the formal slides. Now I'm going to shift gears. There's just a bunch of resources, but I will try to move through them soon, pretty quick, because it's 5:38. I'm going to try to quit around 6 o'clock or so. But again, this is recorded, so you can go back and see, and I'll try to answer questions at the end. My personal website is go.osu.edu/aqua. We also have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have listservs. The listservs can be found on the website there. So if you are looking for resources, obviously things are a little bit different, primarily over Zoom. But once we get on the other side of COVID, obviously you'll start seeing resources and information come out, such as what we're seeing here, the North Central Regional Aquaculture Center. Again, that is a great resource for folks, but we had our meeting February 1st in Columbus, Ohio at the Crown Plaza Hotel. And so that was, you did have to pay a fee to be able to cover the costs and stuff for the conference, but we had 150 people there or so, something around those lines. And we had researchers and extension people from the entire Midwest, as well as a bunch of farmers. So it's a great place for you to go and get your resources at that North Central Conference, as well as the OAA conference. So on our website, there's a considerable amount of information there, including a bunch of these links and links that are not mentioned here for aquaculture beginners. I mentioned earlier, not only YouTube, but certain entities such as Iowa State University utilize Vimeo as opposed to YouTube. And so if NCRAG funds work, they put their work on this, what is it called? ISUCALS, which I think is their college that they're referencing at Iowa State University. But there's considerable number of short fish health workshops that are there. But notice that these are only about 4 to 9 minutes, 10 minutes long. And so there's some fish health workshops here, and I'm just going to scroll down. There are several other different fish health workshops. And believe me, if you're just getting into aquaculture, you need to understand fish health. And the second thing you really need to understand, because they're going hand in hand, is water quality. So there's short presentations there on introduction to water quality, parameters. There's 3 different parameters, videos that you can watch there. And obviously these are all federally or state funded resources, so you can go and look at these for free. And then I believe I've got one more: considerations for different types of water systems common in the North Central region. So that would be just an 8-minute video, be very helpful for a lot of folks who are, again, participating in this workshop or in this video right now. I mentioned Vimeo, but you do have the NCRAC, that's ncrac.org, the North Central Regional Aquaculture Center. They also have a North Central Region listserv, and there's a lot of great information provided there. And that, again, you can email Dr. Joseph Morris or Quinn. It's probably best just to email Joe to be able to be added to that listserv. But you can see, I suppose, I don't know if you can see my pointer or not, but you can look at content by category. You can search for people who are engaged in the North Central Regional Aquaculture Center. So if you're not in Ohio, I am your contact for Ohio, but if you're in another state, there are people from all of the Midwest that are engaged in this, so you can learn about their research or their extension activities. You can see the news, the projects that they funded, but what they have a lot of great of is actually they've just updated a bunch of publications, but they've also created a bunch more videos, such as this is a longer video by my friend Alan Patillo, who used to be at Iowa State University. It's about 54 minutes long, but it's a pretty good presentation for folks to go through and learn about how to do aquaponics yourself. Whether you're extremely small scale or looking at something a little bit larger, it does give you a great introduction. It does not replace hands-on activities, but it is a great way to look at your resources. And you can see some other examples on the left side, such as indoor shrimp aquaculture, FSIS part roll, which pertains to catfish, and those types of examples. Another presentation that is, or another workshop that we have recorded pre-COVID that's out there is through the University of Minnesota. It's the Aquaponics Symposium that I was engaged in. And so it was an entire day spent up on the St. Paul campus. But what you see here in the top right is a fish veterinarian. So this is a veterinarian trained in fish, does a lot of salmonid work, or has a lot of experience with salmonid work. And so he brings more of the veterinarian and the aquatic animal health side. I bring more of the interest in the water quality side. And then there were some other folks who gave their presentations there, and a producer presentation. So that's close to 2 hours worth of work that you can go through and just see what we chatted about at that aquaponics symposium. And again, that's a USDA grant. So everything was funded through USDA and through NCRAC to be able to allow us to provide materials for folks who are interested. And that's straight off YouTube. That's, I think that's actually found, if you type this into YouTube, you will get it up. But I believe that's published through OSU South Center's YouTube website. Another OSU South Center's publication video that we have is the Ohio State University DWC Aquaponic educational video. And I know I'm talking fast, but these are just resources for you to go back and look at later on. But this video, I think we're at about 1,500 views or so. It's a pretty great little video. It's only 16 minutes long, but you get to see my pretty mug sitting here explaining some of the operations that we did. We built 3 replicates down at the South Centers, and those same exact systems were built at Central State University, again, the other land-grant university in Ohio. And so we have 3 of those systems provided at the South Centers down in Pike County, Ohio, that is located in Piketon, as well as at Central State. Another place, a great acronym, UWSP-NADF. So this is the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. The NADF is the Northern Aquaculture Demonstration Facility. And they have a ton of great resources because they do a lot of cool and cold water work up there. They do a lot of work with Atlantic salmon as well as walleye. But you can see along the left side there, they have aquaculture education, publications, resources, and aquaponics information. And so, for example, on the farmers, If you're growing small, if you're looking at just being a small hatchery, which it's great, we need more folks who are only interested in growing the small fish. We have a do-it-yourself 24-hour microfeeder video and presentation that they have there. So a lot of great information that you can find at this operation. So UW Stevens Point does a lot of great stuff out there for folks. On NCRAC, so most of those were videos that we just chatted with, but on NCRAC's website, you can see PowerPoint, you can see technical bulletins on there. This is just an example of an aquaponic systems, particularly the hydroponic component. NCRAC also runs or houses the yellow perch culture manual that you can download and print yourself for free. They have, I don't have it here, but they have the walleye culture manual that you can do. And then there's been a new publication just went out last year on the production of walleye as potential food fish. Again, free stuff available for you to provide, available for you. And then this is where the really overwhelming part comes in, because we're in the North Central Regional Aquaculture Center, but a lot of extension fact sheets that are also very relevant to our region is published by the Southern Regional Aquaculture Center. You'll hear that as SRAC or SHRAC. And so in each of these tabs, you can go in and click and learn more. So if you want to start a pond operation, you can go through and learn about pond construction. Or for this example, if you want to learn about saltwater shrimp production, you can go through and click that and go in, and there'll be examples of those that are found in there for you. This one I should have taken out because unfortunately we did have to take these off. Hopefully we can get these back up. The Ohio Aquaculture Association puts their conference presentations on here. So there's rainbow trout production, urban aquaculture, Kentucky State University research. So that's, they're in Frankfort, Kentucky. They're not too far from Southern Ohio. They do a lot of great aquaculture work. And so there's a lot of great presentations from university folks, and some of these are from farms as well. And so you can find those, you can find that information. Well, you can, if you want these specific ones that you can see, email me and we'll do what we can to make sure we get them to you. And then if you're not from Ohio, think about the relative state you're in, whether you're in the Midwest or not, you probably have an aquaculture association in your state. So I mentioned OAA here in Ohio, but in Indiana, you have the Indiana Aquaculture Association. I mentioned Wisconsin, there's the Wisconsin Aquaculture Association. Minnesota is starting to get their feet back under them. Iowa State Iowa is starting to get their feet back under them as far as their associations go. So you can either join one that's already strong and building, or you can help be a part of one and revitalizing or starting one if that may be what it takes. But these are great ways for people to exchange information and to really engage with other farmers and to also engage with university. So you also have the National Aquaculture Association that I mentioned earlier. This is just the front face of their website, and joint with the National Aquaculture Association, the North Central Regional Aquaculture Association, again, I know it's a lot to throw at you, and the U.S. Aquaculture Society, they all three pulled funding to publish a great deal. I think we're up to 20 or so videos on various different things. One of those, as I mentioned earlier, was the aquaponics, how to do it yourself, such as this one. But there's a lot of other information, what you need to know about biosecurity. And for those of you who have the capacity to sit there for longer than 30 seconds at a time, I believe a lot of these run closer to an hour. And so you look at the regulatory costs of doing aquaculture. You look at branding if you're on the coast. You look at branding opportunities for your oysters. So there's a lot of great information that can be found freely available for you. And the best part is that while it may be on YouTube, it is backed by research that is backed by science, and it's unbiased science. It's funded a lot by USDA, NOAA, and those types of NSF and those types of operations, or those types of entities. For regulations on your resources, and if you're in Ohio, just contact your state aquaculture specialist. So that's me. If you're in Illinois, that's Paul. If you're in Indiana, that's Amy or Kwamina or one of those other groups. So depending on what state you're in, or if you don't know who your state aquaculture specialist is, and you're here in the Midwest, just send me an email and I can get you in contact. But you really need to understand the regulations for your state. So for example, one of the entities that regulates aquaculture is the Ohio Division of Wildlife. So almost 2 more slides, just pictures. So go out and do your farm tours when possible. This is part of your resources. So on the right here, this is, well, this is an operation in Southern Ohio. And they do a lot of farm tours. They do a lot of education. And so it's really, really great to be able to go out and physically see, but there's really no substitute for going out and either working part-time, working full-time, doing whatever you can to being engaged and getting a hands-on experience, because all of those videos I showed you mean nothing if you don't have the hands-on experience to go with that. I'm going to pause just a second while I grab a water. There again is my email address. And then I see about 10 things. I suppose most of that's from Julie. And we will answer any questions if you guys have. In the next 10 minutes, if we run over than that, then that's perfectly fine as well. All right, so most of what I see here is information from Julie, which, man, that saved me a lot of work from going back and typing all of that in there. I see you smiling. Yeah, those are a substantial amount of resources just there for you. I believe folks should be, it looks like I can, so hopefully you can as well, the panelists. You can probably copy and paste all of that into a Word document, because when we hang up, that will go away. So if you want to make your life easy, you might want to drag and pull over all of that over into a Word document there. But we do have 9 minutes left. If you have any questions, you are welcome to ask Julie here and type it into the text. If not, certainly feel free to drop off or send me an email anytime. I'm here to support you any way I can.